Welcome to How Now, the podcast where we talk about how to live in the now. And here's your host, Kim Martin Raymond.
Peace and blessings, love and light, and welcome to this edition of the How Now podcast, where we talk about how to live in the now. I'm your host, Kim Martin Raymond, and I'm a minister, spiritual life coach, holistic nutritionist, author, and founder of Redefining You LLC, where I help my clients to realign themselves, mind, body, and spirit. And welcome to the show. We are in season 6 of the How Now podcast, and if you are new to the podcast, welcome to the How Now family. We're glad to have you here. This year is the year of execution. So last year we focused on the 365-day challenge, where we challenged people to create healthy habits, mind, body, and spirit. And now we're in the year of execution, and we're going to be talking about things that are going to help us to be better versions of ourselves. And so I have some special guests that are joining me, some guest hosts that are joining me this year as we go through season 6. And so we're going to be talking to one of my wonderful guests in just a few moments. But for those of you who are new to the How Now podcast, please be sure to go to my website, www.hownowpodcast.com, and click on your favorite podcast platform, and be sure to like, follow, share, and subscribe. You can also scroll to the bottom of the page on my website, and there's a banner there that will that you can click on for this week's show, and it will take you to the How Now YouTube channel, where you can check out my playlists like Tuesday, or see what you've missed in any of my previous seasons, or also check out what was going on in the 365-day challenge. All things How Now. Okay, so remember, go to www.hownowpodcast.com. Okay, so let's get into today's show. You know, I said we have special co-hosts that are joining me this year, and one of them is my guest, and let me bring him on stage. And he is going to be talking about living your purpose. That is one of the segments that we have this year. We have him visiting with us once a month. We also talk about the 12 spiritual principles with Dr. Reginald Howard, and he talks about tapping into those spiritual principles, and he has a special luminary that he talks about each month. And then we also have Leah Garcia, who talks about being financially fit. So we are talking about a plethora of things that we can continue to place into our mental, spiritual, and physical toolboxes, again, to make us better versions of ourselves. Okay, and so without delay, I'm going to have my guest host to introduce himself as always, and we'll get started with tonight's show.
All right. Thank you so much, Kim. So much to go over today. I had so many life lessons coming into tonight's show. If those have ever seen me on a podcast or on Kim's show, you know that I'm in a different space right now, physically and mentally, and maybe a little emotionally. So I'll share on that as we get into the layers of it tonight. It's always good to be able to practice what we talk about. And I've had the opportunity tonight to really practice a lot of what we're getting into. So Jason Jurado, my company's One Path. You know, we talk about, I've been asked before, is it, you mean there's only one path to where I'm going, where you're going? No, but we're all going to the same place. You know, Ram Dass says we're all just walking each other home.
Right.
And I use that example as saying the top of the mountain. That's where we're all walking home to. And if you can imagine a mountain, there's a lot of paths to the top of that mountain, but they're all going to the top of the mountain. So it's about discovering what your path is, what works best for you. You might see someone over on another path. It seems they're going faster than you. You know, comparison is a thief of joy, as they say. So we don't do that because we know we're on our path. And it's like we've got our hiking boots or shoes on and we're headed in our direction. But it's about discovering what that direction is, discovering what's right for us, and then starting that path. And then also not being afraid to say, you know what, this isn't the path. Turns out this isn't for me. So you know, we've talked in the past the episodes about, you know, how we're going to do that, how we get there. And so tonight we'll dive a little bit deeper into that.
Yes, awesome, awesome. So glad to have you here again to share space with you and to talk about again living your purpose and different aspects of that. And one thing that we've been following as we've gone along our different paths is that bridge. And so that is a concept, as a technique that you've been talking about since we started in January. And so we're just continuing to peel back the layers and dig a little deeper into that. So, if you could touch on the bridge technique a little bit as we go into tonight's show, that would be great for those who are just tuning in.
Definitely, thank you. And you know, it's funny, I just had a conversation with someone tonight about the exact same thing about bridge, is that
Mhm.
she's struggling. She's having some issues, this person, this client, with some things are showing up. And when things don't go the right way, she's trying, she's going through the process, she's reading the books, she's doing the affirmations, doing all that stuff. But what
Right.
happens is she goes from a negative place, she tries to go all the way over to here to I am
Mhm.
enough, things are great, things are good, you know, all's going to
Mhm.
work out, I am light, I'm, you know, which is wonderful. But to go from here to here is a giant leap and it's too much. And what's happening is that she's trying to go from here to here and she's catching a shortcut because she can't make it all the way. So what
Right.
happens is then she gets frustrated and it just loops. And so it's like, oh, well, you know, and then that negative self-talk comes in. Oh, you can't do anything, you can't, whatever,
Right.
because you're not making that what can be an impossible journey all at once to take that huge leap. Those of us Gen X and older remember Evil Knievel, you know,
Yes.
when he used to drive that motorbike
That's
and
right.
do all kinds of leaps, and you
That's
know
right.
he tried to jump some places that were just too far. And
That's right.
so that's where when I, you know, and that's what came up and that's what brought this up for me is talking to another client. And she was where she was at and I was talking about living your purpose and moving on, and she was like, I can't, she just looked at me plain face and was like, I can't even hear what you're saying. I don't even, those words don't even make sense to me where I'm at right now.
That's right.
And so it really reflected, you know, I had to reflect inside and say, wait a minute, you have this vision, you've gone on your journey, you know, you've had your own personal bridge so to speak to get from
Right.
where you're at to where you're at now, and I still use this process. And so that's when I came up with the process, and so the acronym is bridge, B.R.I.D.G.E.
Right.
And just to touch real quick on it, because we've touched about it, but those that might be joining us for the first time this month, there's two styles. I won't go through both of them, but there's the path to transformation, which is more pragmatic, more for the every client. And then there's also a spiritual path to transformation, which as we go through each step, I will talk about both, but I won't talk about both right now. So the bridge, the B, be aware of your current situation. R, which we're going to talk about tonight, removing limiting beliefs and negative emotions from the past that are holding you back. And then I, identify your core values and mission. And then we get to D, design a clear vision and strategy, that making that goal. G, generate momentum and confidence. So taking the little wins and making them make sense towards your bigger goal. And then E, embracing your purpose and your potential. And that's fully stepping into your authentic, empowered life. So that's kind of going from where you're at to where you are. And the first thing is you have to do is realize where you're at. And that's what we've talked about already, is being aware of your current situation. So very important, is all things start with awareness. You
That's
know,
right.
part of my journey tonight that I'm a little frazzled about is our clothes washing machine broke down. It needs work. And so someone came out last week and they fixed part of it and then said, oh, we'll be back Friday. And they came back later in the week on Friday and then came out and spent several hours hammering, beating, doing stuff. Little made me nervous, and said,
Right.
oh, I can't finish. We'll be back Monday. And now they're back now trying to figure it out still.
Right.
That's part of the journey, right? That's part
Right.
of, he had to start with where he's at. Okay, so what's wrong? Figure out what's
Right.
wrong. And then, okay, where do we want to go? Well, we want this working right, this working right. So that's as an
Right.
example. So it could work with whatever you're doing. It just so happens that, you know, we work with that mental health, we work within that
Right.
spirituality, that inner vision, that inner journey that we're all on, and how we get from where we're at to where we want to go.
Right. I think something that's very important is all these things that we're talking about. Like you said, it's a process.
Right.
And it is definitely an exercise in patience. If anything else is an exercise in patience, because
Yeah,
you know we are in this microwave society. you know I
right.
think about, when we talk about, we were talking about Evil Knievel and talking about, being Gen Xers and things of that nature. you know we remember a time where, we would go out and play, and then, we would come home and somebody would leave a message on the answering machine, and those sort of things. We had to wait,
Right,
or you waited till you got home before you could make a phone call. You had to wait for somebody to get off the phone so that you can get on the phone and have your turn if you had
right,
siblings, things of those things and that nature. So we grew up in a time where, time moved, but it didn't move so swiftly
right,
that we knew to wait.
right,
And in this society that we live in now, everything is instant. We want things instantly. We want to have access to things, at a moment's notice, at the drop of a hat. And it's so difficult to be in this space that we're in, and to be able to exercise patience when everything seems on demand.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of my teachers had a saying. He says that change happens in an instant. It just takes us a long time to get to that instant sometimes. It takes us a while to get to that one moment. But when things shift, they change. And you're like, we talk about, let's say you're a smoker. Comes a time when you were a smoker and now you're not a smoker anymore.
Right.
You've had that last cigarette. Now it might take you a long time to get to that last cigarette, just as an example,
Right.
but at some point you have it. That's one of the challenges of the mindset that you're talking about, is that
Right.
wanting, for lack of a better word, instant gratification. We want to
Right.
change now. We want it. Well, why don't I feel better? Whatever. If you falsify those results, if
Right.
you, and by example is, oh no, I'm fine, I got over it, I'm fine, it's going to come back, and
Right.
so it does take work. Now when you make that change, I work with clients on a daily basis, and I have the honor of working them, walking along their side. I've told you before, I'm kind of like a tour guide. I don't
Right.
do anything to anyone. I'm with them on their journey. But
That's
to
right.
see them turn that corner, to see them go have that realization and change in that moment, it's amazing. And it happens in that moment. We'll do a process, we'll do a technique, we'll be talking about it. They'll
Right.
look at something through a new mindset, and I can just see that shift. And that shift just takes that moment. But if they were to jump ahead, so to speak, and jump ahead in the reading, as we used to say, right?
Yes.
And not read all the chapters, it's not going to be true and honest. So that change might shift back. So
Right.
that's one of the challenges about waiting for it. It doesn't have to take a long time. It takes as long as it takes, though. And
Right.
that's kind of a paradox, right? But that's the reality that we have to look at, is, understanding that I can change now. I can. We all can.
Right.
But is it true? Is it honest? Is it going to get us to where we want to go and continue? Is it sustainable? Is
Right.
this sustainable change? And that's what we have to look at. And I'm going to segue, if you don't mind, right into what we're going to talk about tonight, is that R. And that R, and this is a little bit of jargon. You have to, I come from the world of neurolinguistic programming. So yes, we have jargon. We all do. But
That's
the jargon is removing limiting beliefs and negative emotions from the past that are holding you back.
right. Yes.
So limiting beliefs, where does that come from? So that means that you learned something, and at one point in your life, whether you were 4 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old, whether it was when you actually learned it in a book, or you were studying, or you observed somebody that you respect, a parent,
Mhm.
a relative, a teacher, and you just saw, oh, well, this is how it works. But maybe that's how it worked for them, but not for you. And
Right.
then you take that and you make it part of your, I'll call it dictionary, your rule book, so to speak, in your
Right.
unconscious mind. Once again, some people say subconscious mind. My world, we say unconscious mind. Same thing, basically. And it becomes a rule. And what if that rule is wrong? Now that is limiting, because it's not allowing you to completely do what you want to do. And it's a belief. It becomes a belief. And it's like, no, that's how it is. Now, if I was to ask you to list all of the beliefs you have, I'm going to say you probably couldn't list all of
Right.
them. because we don't think of them, because they become unconscious, right? And it just
Right.
becomes, it's just that unconscious mind is driving the bus, so to speak. And so it's that. And then if you don't take a step back and stop and go, wait a minute, why do I feel that way? You
Right.
know, it's not going to get you to where you want to go. You were talking about layup and community. I love community. We
Yeah.
we met through you, and I actually joined her on our show, and we talked about that. We talked about financial gains and
Yeah.
financial stability and the limiting beliefs that we carry from our youth that hold us back from making the amount of money, having the true abundance that's in our lives and seeing it. And
Right.
that was a great conversation. You know, I love meeting new people and having these conversations. Her community is amazing, just like yours. But
Mhm.
it was great to engage with them, and we kind of had some good conversations around that. But what happens is you just carry this with you. And then you wonder why, like if it's relationships, you know,
Mhm.
why are you having struggles in your relationships? Well, you've most likely observed, were saw, maybe participated in relationships in the past that weren't healthy in the
Yeah.
way that you need them to be. And that then becomes, well, that's what you do, isn't it? And it becomes that rule, and it follows you because you follow it.
Yeah. Yeah. Like you said, it's almost like something that it's it makes me think of the Four Agreements. I love that
Right.
book. And
Yeah.
things that we agree to, things that we've been told or things that we've seen or we've experienced and we've agreed to believe that to be so.
Yeah.
And it's a challenge when we don't so, when we do things. I think about what it makes me think about is church with my
Hmm.
grandma. I
Right.
love my nana. She's just my heart and soul. Our birthdays are a day apart. I absolutely loved my nana, and wherever she went or whatever she did, that's what it was. She went to a Baptist church. I went to a Baptist church.
Right.
If anybody ever asked me, well, why are you back? Because Nana went there, and that's what I just went where Nana went.
Right.
And I did what Nana said. And that's another thing. Some of us Gen Xers have experienced. We did as we were told. We were told to do things a certain way, and we didn't question it.
Right.
And it wasn't that anybody necessarily asked us why. Until many years later, and now we're in the in that stage of why. And well, why do you believe what you believe? And it
Hmm.
wasn't until I started going through my doctoral program and until I started doing things and had to really answer, why do you believe what you believe? Why do you think those things? I had never been challenged with that question. It
Right.
was like, it's just so. It just is. But
Right.
what does that mean? So it definitely is something that we have to consider when we're thinking about things and standing on beliefs and ideals. We have to know the why. It goes back to that why.
Right. Yeah. This might not be fitting to this, but I want to mention it because I love the saying. And it says, one of my teacher's teachers had told him, that said, the lesson is simple, the student is complicated. And I might have mentioned that before. And we overcomplicate things. We put so much layers onto things, and that sometimes it's just that simple, that we gain layers of this stuff as we go along. We come in from source. We've talked about that before, whether that's God, Gaia, creator,
Right.
energy, whatever that is to you. We come from that place. We all do.
Yeah.
And that is us. But then we start putting on the I ams. I am Jason. I am a male. I am a Marine. I am a husband. I am a pet. I'm a cat dad. All these things, that we put on. But where did that come from? Like, so we're talking about, right? And so the only limitations, now here's the big one. The only limitations that we have are the ones that we put on ourselves.
Absolutely.
That's it. That's it. Now that's scary. And there might be folks out there, and excuse my language, but I say this in my groups. I say, saying screw you, Jason, is acceptable. I say,
Right.
kind of tongue in cheek. I try to keep things
Right.
light. And
Right.
by that, what I mean is saying, that's not true for me. And that's okay. You don't have to agree with everything I say. You trust yourself. Don't trust me. Don't trust the experts. Don't trust whatever.
Right.
Always verify. Always look for yourself. Always find out what your truth with a capital T is, right?
That's right.
But when we look at these things, it's what's holding us back. And that's what that step is about what are these limiting beliefs? Why do you feel that you can't accomplish what you now want to accomplish? You know, on the show that I was talking about finances, the big bomb that I dropped there is what my mentor said when we were talking about this. He said, the amount of money that you made last year is the amount that you think you're worth. That's a hard pill to swallow. That's a lot, and that we went from there. That conversation went from there and we went deeper on it. But basically it's your own limiting beliefs about money. And so the same thing with our relationships, with who we are, with where we go, what we can accomplish is there are some, we've talked about we're spiritual beings having a human experience. Okay. Now there are limitations to what this physical human body can do.
Right.
I can't do what I used to do. I used to run 10, 15 miles without an issue. Right. I'm on the other side of the 100, of the middle of the 100 now. I'm closer to 100 than I am to 0. Let's just put it that way. Right. But that's just a limitation, and Milton Erickson, the hypnotherapist, one of the grandfathers of this whole thing, he used to say that it just takes time. You can accomplish whatever you want. It just takes time. And I don't have enough time to train for a marathon right now. I don't cause that, but you can accomplish whatever you want. And so we put those limitations on ourselves. And so we start with what are the limiting beliefs? And, what's funny is we tell on ourselves with our language. And that's what neurolinguistic programming does, is we listen to language. The first thing we do is we learn how to listen to language and to hear what people are saying. And, there's the meta model where people talk about, well, I can never do this, and she always does that. And it's like, always? There's never been a time when they haven't. Right. And that's a little deeper subject, but just listening to clients, listening to their language, I can usually hear what their limiting beliefs are. I could usually, because I take copious notes because it's so important to plug into what they're saying. And so I'll write stuff down and then I'll look at it and I'll go back and be like, you mentioned this. Where does this come from? Or what, or this is what you believe? Because this is what you're saying, and it's just that mirror to hold up to people to say, wait a minute, where is that coming from? Why do I believe that? And that's part of the journey.
Yeah. I mean, and that's powerful words, because it's we sometimes don't, we say things, once the words are out there, there's no, they're not on a wire that you can just reel them back in after once they're out there, they're out there. Once they're sent, there's, and it's amazing how those things can manifest. We talk about words and the power of words, and biblically speaking, the power of the tongue, and how it's like it can light a fire, and things like that. We hear all of those things, and there is power in words and in the language that we use when we're describing ourselves and our experiences and other things, and it is so important that we do hear what it is that we're saying, and how we're saying it. Sometimes, and I think about in childcare, in the field that I'm in, and we talk about, well, teachers, be careful when you're talking to children, watch your tone. Sometimes it's your cadence as well.
Right. Yeah.
How you're saying it, and you may not be listening. Oh, I didn't mean for it to sound like that. And we're quick to say, oh, my bad, I didn't mean for it to say like that. And that becomes that whole story of the impact of what you say over what it is. Sometimes we say things and we don't think about the impact that it has on a person. I always tell the story when I do my trainings. I talk about how if I walked by you and I had a cup of tea and I spilled that tea on you, I tripped and I spilled the tea on you. It wasn't my intention to hurt you, but that tea was hot. It may have burned you. It may have stained your clothes. So these are all things I've done. So it wasn't my intention to hurt or to harm, but it left an impact.
Right.
It changed something. Every time I walk by you, that doesn't mean that next time I walk by you and I'm walking with a cup of tea that you're not going to flinch, or you're going to think that I'm going to do it again. So we really have to think about the power of our words. We really have to think about the intention over impact.
Right.
And how, is that impact something that's going to be so deep seated that it's going to be difficult for us to reverse that?
Right.
you know? So, like I said, there's power in the words.
Yeah. And I love that you brought that up because that's a perfect segue because they say that the unconscious mind is like speaking to between a 4 to 6 year old. So your unconscious mind is just what you said, and think of how we talk to our unconscious mind, which let's just say it's how you talk to yourself as an example. Okay. Oh, you're so this. Oh, you're that. Oh, you always do this. Oh, you do. Your unconscious mind, all it wants to do, it's like that small child. All it wants to do is make you happy.
Right.
It follows your direction. So when you say, oh, you're so X, it says, okay, we're X. That's what we were going to do. And
Right.
it's going to find ways to manifest, you know what I mean by X, right? Whatever that word
Yes.
is, it's
That's
going to
right.
manifest that in your life. It's like, okay, we can do that. So you have to be so careful with your language, and we understand that now that the unconscious mind. There's a lot of neuroscience behind this, and we're not going to get into all that. But that's one of the beauties of what I love about this is that it's an art and a science, and I
Yes.
love studying both of them, and I love experiencing both of them. So there's parts to our nervous system. There's the reticular activating system, the RAS. Whatever you program into it, so i.e. what you focus on is what you get because it starts
Yeah.
looking for it. So when you start putting these words into your unconscious mind saying, oh, you're this, you're that, you're not this, you're not that, you're never going to achieve this, you're never going to achieve, oh my goodness, it says, okay, not a
Right.
problem. You don't want to achieve this? Okay, well, we were going to give you that, but now we're going to have to figure out how not to, and it's just,
Right.
it wants to satisfy you. And so all this stuff shows up. Now, to shift a little bit around that, because the R talks about removing limiting beliefs, and negative emotions from the past. So, shifting into that, emotions aren't bad.
Right.
Emotions are just signals. But here's what happens. This is the theory, timeline therapy that I'm trained in, and it's registered trademark, all that fun stuff. It was by my
Right.
mentor Tad James came up with it. NLP does time work, but timeline therapy is from Tad. What happens is that the theory is that your very first experience with, let's say, anger, you have that at whatever age that was when you were exposed to anger. You were 2 years old, you're 3 years old, whatever you were. That's the gestalt. That's the first event. That's that first pin in the line. Okay. Now, every time you see anger after that, it still sticks to that. It's like a string of pearls, if you can
Mm.
imagine.
Yes.
And it's all attached to that first time. Okay. So you see, oh, that's what anger means. Oh, and this is what anger means. Oh, and this anger. And so it all goes back to that. So, we've talked about this before when it's like road rage.
Yes.
When something happens that, let's say it's not super dangerous, someone just cut in front of you in line, someone didn't let you merge, plenty of time, whatever. But then you're like,
Right.
but it's not about that incident for the most part. It's about, let's, as an example, limiting beliefs, right? This is where we're going with negative emotions. It's about, you can't do that to me.
Right.
I am somebody. I'm important. You
Right.
can't, people always act like I don't matter. It brings all these things up. All these filters show up. And so what timeline does is we go back to that first event of anger. We remove that memory. We go back. It's a detailed process, but we go back on your timeline. We go back to that very first event and we get the learnings.
Mm.
Now, that's a little jargonistic, but what the learnings are means what to learn from this event that allow you to let go of this anger easily and effortlessly now. And here's the deal though. Learnings are for yourself, they're positive, and they're about in the future. And what that means is if you go back to that first event, you don't go, oh, well,
Mhm.
people suck. Nope. That's not about you.
Right. Right.
So more likely you could say, oh, well, people are going to act the way they're going to act. I have the option to choose to react the way I do. Okay. It's positive, right? That's for you. It's positive. And if you were to come across this again in your future, that'd be helpful. So that meets all the criteria of a good learning. And so with those learnings, what happens is, and there's more to it because the process itself actually, I won't get into all of it, but there's quantum behind it and stuff like that. What
Mhm.
happens is you rewrite that memory. And
Right.
so how it affects you currently is where. So can you imagine taking the stuff from anything negative from your past that's been driving you? in not so good ways, right? Here's the deal. If something was good for you, if your values are okay and you're doing okay in that area of your life, we're not going to change your values. If there's something that you believe that's helping you, there's no reason to touch it, right? I'm okay. I'm not going to make you do anything, right? But if this is causing you to not live the life you want to live, to not achieve the goals that you want to achieve, to not be the person you want to be, well, guess what? We've got to do some work. You've got to do some work, right?
Right.
I'm here to guide you through the work to get you there. And that's part of that, releasing what no longer serves you. And that we use those terms a lot now, but what that means is if it's not helping you get to where you want to go, you got to get rid of it. That's the gist of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. And that's something that I talk about a lot as well when we're talking about, responding as opposed to reacting to the things that are
Yeah,
going on around us. We hear the cliche, when you know better, you do better. And there's some validity to that. We're trying to understand, like you said, as human beings, we're always looking to compartmentalize things. We're always looking for a little box for things to go into, for things to fit into. And so, we're like, just like you said, I've had that experience. Okay, I've had that mad experience before. Okay, let me go in my little box. And oh, there's that mad one right there. And just like you said, and we start putting things in there and shoving things in there because that's something that was familiar to us. But just
right,
like you said, if it's something that's negative and we're constantly going back to that, it's not going to again serve us. And
right,
so we have to say, okay, if it's constantly putting me in a reactive state and it's causing my emotions to go to where I'm hurting myself and even worse hurting others,
right,
then yeah, I need to turn that around and start saying, okay, what are some things that I need to do different? And again, going to the root of why am I feeling this way and what's causing me to feel that way? And was there some validity in why I felt the way? Because we're always looking to justify things. Well, I
yeah,
was right and I was right in slapping him because he did X, Y, and Z. Were you?
yeah,
It's a lot. It's a lot. That's what I'm saying. It's a little tricky.
yeah. And I'm gonna tell on myself. I'm gonna use me, Jason, as an example. So I was sharing about the whole washing machine issue we got going. Okay. So was very flustered earlier. I had to catch myself because physician heal thyself, right? So this person, he's trained, he's the professional, he's working on it. A little history about me real quick. Okay. And this is what happens. You're talking about, we have to say justify, right? My grandfather had his own garage. My mom's side, my maternal grandfather had his own garage from 1947 to 1987, 86 actually. And so as a youngster, I worked there. So I've been turning wrenches from 6 years old, sweeping floors, changing oil, getting in wrenches, holding
Oh,
lights.
yeah, yeah.
So very mechanical. So just working on engines and cars in my blood, literally. And that's from getting cuts and stuff. That's why I mean literally, actually. And so grew up around that. Grew up around turning wrenches, as we call it, right? Being mechanical. So jump ahead, when years later I went in the Marine Corps, and I said, well, I'm looking for something that I could do as a career after I get out, and I ended up went into aviation. So I'm actually a certified jet engine mechanic.
Nice.
So I'm pretty mechanical. I'm pretty good at that. I got that down. It's a mindset, right? So that's just, I grew up around that. Okay. I don't always do it, but it's there. It's just
Right.
a mindset that I have. So he's working on this washing machine, and he's banging and he's drilling, and I'm like, I don't know what he's doing,
Right.
but he's not doing well. But
Right.
so jumping ahead, so tonight he came back. They were going to be here between 12. They were going to come in later.
Right. Right.
So he shows up. We're getting close to time for you and I to meet. And and I'm down in my office on the first floor. I have a 2-story house on the first floor, and he's around the corner through the kitchen, but I could hear the banging. I could hear the drilling. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do my show tonight because you're going to hear that. And so I started getting frustrated and flustered. And what's he doing? And why isn't he getting it done? And do I need to go talk to him? And that one little instant, that little flare, do I need to talk to him about what he's doing? And I said, no, you don't. And what this comes from, and the reason I'm telling the story is because limiting beliefs. if you want it done right, you got to do it yourself, right? I could hear that popping up. Oh,
Yes.
well, I know what's best. I could fix it. I have to take control of the situation. If I want it done the way I want it done, I have to, all that silly stuff that comes up. And I heard it all today. I'll be honest, I heard it all. And I was getting flustered and I was getting hot and I was like, what am I going to do? And I had to catch myself and I said, stop. That's the old person talking. That's your old version speaking. You can let that go. Let it go.
Yes.
And I said, okay. I got my breath back, as we say, right?
Oh, yes.
And I came back into that and I said, that's going to take what it's going to take. That's for another day. That's for another time. Whatever that outcome is, we'll handle it. We'll go forward. If you have to take a load of laundry over to your parents' house and do some laundry, which you're getting close, then you're going to do that, right? But
Right.
I caught myself. I came up with that old stuff, you're going to because I'm a very take charge person. I'm very much I'll lead or I'll follow, but my default is to take the reins.
Right.
I love to step back and let someone else take it. Because I'm confident enough to where I'm like, you
Right.
handle it. I don't have
Right.
any ego in taking charge, but I'm really good at it. My
Right.
whole life, through
Right.
school, through the military, I was a really good Marine, and just I'm good at it. I was a leader in retail leadership for a lot of years. It comes natural.
Right.
But I also know when to step back. And this what showed up was take charge. You got to take care of this. You got to. And I was like, no, let it go. And soon as I let that go, letting go of what no longer serves you to create space for new possibilities, right?
Right.
And
That's
that's what
right.
we're talking about. And so I was
Mhm.
like, listen, you're going to talk about this tonight. Why are you living it again? But it shows up, and that's the lesson,
Yes.
right? That's the
Yes.
lesson. And that's why I talk about the bridge, right? Because it's not here or there. There's not always that switch. You build these techniques in, so then there becomes a switch. It doesn't take me as long to get from my awareness to embracing that potential, right? I
That's
can
right.
go over that bridge really fast now because it's built in. But I had an episode tonight where I needed it.
Yeah.
I had to step back and say, whoa, okay, where are you at? And where do you want to be?
Love
You're
that.
flustered, you're frustrated, you want to jump in. Okay, where do you want to be? I want to be calm. I want to go talk to Kim and her community. I want to
Yeah.
have a great evening. I want to be calm, relaxed. Okay,
Yes.
how are we going to get there, Jason? Renee call came back.
That's it. I love it. I love it. And that's like I said, that the importance of having those toolboxes.
Yep,
That's what they mean to me. Just being able to reach back and say, okay, this is something. Oh, this situation is coming up. I have a tool for that. Wait a minute, I
right.
know something for that. Let me go back and reach for that. And make sure I'm not reaching for the wrong thing. But I'm of that mindset too. Yeah, I used to be a very, very type A. I tell some people still know I'm probably like an A minus. Now I'm not doing that. I'm A minus, B, B A minus. I'm working on it. Yeah, I'm still a work
Yeah,
in progress. But it's funny because yes, I think about what do I want the end result of this to be?
right.
Especially if you're in a situation where you're having words with somebody, you're going back and forth with a significant other with somebody, and then I stop and I say, okay, Kim, what do you want the end result of this to be?
Right.
If I'm having a disagreement with my husband, what do I want the end result to be? Do I want us to go to sleep angry? Do I want to be like, don't touch me? Don't look at me. Or do I want to cuddle with my husband? Do I want to talk to him? Do I want what is the end result?
Yeah,
And then I start thinking about how am I going to get to that place? How am I
exactly.
going to get to that positive place? It's easy to go to the negative. Oh,
Right.
we can go there. I'm in New York. I'm like, let's go. Are we getting there? Are we going there?
Right.
Okay, then let's go. The next roll comes in. You don't forget those things because, like you said, they're ingrained in you. So you
Right.
automatically, oh, you want to go there? Let's go. And I have to say, okay, well, I have to think now as an older adult, as a person who has had some experiences, who has learned a few things, where is it that I want to go? What is that end result? What is it that I'm looking for? I'm looking for the positive into this. And if it means, Kim, shut up. Sometimes it's like, put a finger on your lip. Sometimes it's already be. Do I have to be right in this situation,
Right.
or is it important for me to be heard? Now,
Right.
sometimes that's the thing too. Sometimes may need to be heard, but I don't need to be right
Yeah.
necessarily. So you see what I'm saying? You have to begin to weigh those things. And I mean, I feel like the older I get, I have so many conversations with myself. I think about those things that you see on social media when a person starts typing and all of a sudden they go delete, 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 delete. A lot of that happens sometimes because sometimes I'm like, oh,
Right.
we're going here. And then I have to say, no, delete, 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 delete. Do you want to say that? Do you want to press
Right.
send on that? And it really is. It's a lot to think about. You really have to be. It does become a mindset. It does become a way of life, and it definitely takes practice because just like you said, you can know it for years and years and still go back there.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Talking about that, we just brought up with me, thinking about we're in the computer age, obviously, but it's running old programs. That's what
Yeah.
you do. You run old programs. And, it's like if you're a Windows person, that's like, oh, I'm going to run Windows 3. We went to we went to an antique fair, and someone had a bunch of media and stuff, and he had a sealed box version of like Windows 3, and he's like, still works, it's gonna work. And we were like, on what? What's it gonna work on? Okay, we didn't say it to his face because he was
All
being
right.
very kind, but my wife and I were like, what's it gonna work on?
Right.
We're up on 11 now, and it's like if you're trying to run old programs today, it's not going to work for you, as an example, right? So these things show up and you're like, why am I still operating out of that place? Because that's
Right.
not who I am anymore, or that's not who I
Mm,
want to be anymore. That's the
right.
key, right?
I like that.
They say expecting different, doing the same thing, expecting different results, right? It just doesn't make
That's
sense and it doesn't
right.
work. But in the
That's right.
moment, it's that default. You go back to it, and that's what the work that I do with people is we have to get rid of that,
Right.
because if that program is still there and it's still accessible, man, it feels good sometimes.
Oh yeah.
It feels good. There's talking about social media, have you seen the one now? There's the meme going around about they're saying to older people, square up.
Yes.
They're rolling up
Yes.
and people going square
Yes.
up,
And
and
people
people
are
are
like,
like,
yeah.
right, and some are like, what? But most of them are like, they know
Right.
what that
Right.
means.
That's right.
And that's that old, but that's what happens. That's that old program
Right.
that shows up, is that you get
Right.
defensive or whatever reason, for no reason.
No reason.
It's running off that old program. And so we have these that might seem dormant, but they're not. They're right under the surface, and that's that unconscious mind. That's below consciousness, and that's sitting there. It's just waiting, because the right circumstance or the wrong circumstance and the right person or the wrong person come at you a certain way, and that shows up.
Right.
And the more that we have the awareness, the more that we can go, oh man, where did that come from? That's where, people that know me, that are really close to me, know that I'm pretty zen, pretty settled. I'm pretty in the moment. I have my moments both ways. I have my moments of greatness. I have moments of not so great, but the
Right.
moments of not so great are a lot less than they have been, and they're continually getting less and less. And when it shows up, so my middle name is Paul, and that's what I talk to my unconscious mind. So when I do something silly, or if I start reacting in an old way, I'm like, Jason Paul. I call
Right.
myself like I'm talking to somebody. I'm like, Jason Paul,
Right.
boy, you better stop.
Right.
And that's my anchor. That brings me down. That's like, okay, that's how I shift my awareness. I
Right.
go from reaction to, okay, who are you? Who do you want to be in this moment? Who do you want to show up? How is this affecting your life, and how do you want it to affect your life?
Right.
We let things take over. It's funny that one of the biggest things in our lives that cause poor mental health, poor regular health, and cause issues is our feeling of lack of control.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Most frustration, most anger comes from you feel that you're not in control. And then it's funny though, but then when you step back and you go, wait a minute, but when I respond to these old programs, when I respond to these limiting beliefs that are in the past that I don't remember where they come from, are you really in control? Nope.
Right.
Wait a minute. You mean I'm being driven by something inside of me that I don't want?
Right.
So it's almost that paradox that allows them to shift that mindset and go, wait a minute, I don't want that. I don't want to be run by something that I don't that I didn't think about, that I don't
Right.
care for. And
Wow.
that makes a very positive shift in your life when you realize that you're being driven by these things that you didn't necessarily choose.
Right.
So
Wow.
that's interesting to me.
That's
Yeah.
deep. That's deep.
Yeah.
That's deep. And that's an excellent perspective because I didn't think of it that way either. But that's true. As a control freak, former control freak, it was just like, yes, I got to have my hands on it.
Right.
And just like you said, stepping back, that's true. When you're having those feelings, I know that if I, back many, many moons ago, when I got angry, I didn't like that feeling of not being in control of my emotions. So
Right.
much so that, that it was like a rage. All I saw was red.
Right.
And then all of a sudden I was just like, oh my gosh, what just happened? I didn't
Yeah.
like that feeling. I got super angry one time when I was younger, and I've never gotten that angry since because it scared me that
Yeah.
I was not in control of my feelings so much so that I didn't, it was like I stepped outside of myself and I was like, wait a minute, I didn't like being there.
Right.
And so it is so important for us to be able to, when we talk about self-talk, like I said, I have a lot of conversations. A lot of conversations because it's like, wait a minute, girl. Okay, now stop. Wait a minute. Why are you feeling like this? Why you? Yeah, but I have to do that. That's how I talk to myself. That's how I so to speak, talk myself off the ledge. It's like, wait a minute.
Right.
Where are we going? Why are we going here? And why are you doing this? And do you have to be right? And is this something that's what is it that you want to happen? And I have to sit there and have that conversation with myself. And sometimes when people don't give me that time, I'm one of those people get real quiet because
Right.
now I'm in thought and I'm thinking about.
Right.
And if I'm not given a chance to do that, that's when I get frustrated because I'm just like, okay, wait a minute, I'm trying to process this, and you're not giving me a chance to process it. And that's how I notice when those little flare ups come because I'm like, you're not giving me a chance. I'm trying to wrap my head around this, and I'm not being given an opportunity to do that. And that's where
Right.
the claws come out. Then all of a sudden I'm Wolverine. I'm like, and I have to stop. But it's
Yeah.
amazing because our mind is so complex, and we have, opportunities to, like you said, shift and to change our mindsets and to think about, stop putting things in little boxes and sometimes having to create new boxes.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. And so here's one more though. So one of the things that we're taught is that we're supposed to be consistent and we're supposed to be congruent, right?
Yes.
So why is this person acting this way today and that way tomorrow? Oh, they're just out of control. And so we're taught at a very young age that you're supposed to be who you are.
Yes.
But what if who you are is not you? What if you're following these other rules? And so that's where you have to give yourself grace and go, here's the number one rule. This is what when I talk at schools, when I talk to younger people, when I talk to older people, and they say, what's one bit of advice you'd give anybody? And I always say, have a curious and flexible mindset.
I like that.
So always be looking for, always like, what's that about? What's that about? Having the beginner's mind, we say in Zen, the beginner's mind, right? Looking at things, fresh perspective, and then being flexible enough to change and go, oh, I didn't think of it that way. I can change now. Too many of the arguments we're having today in the world are about people that are just inflexible, because that's what shows up, is that we're supposed to be who we are. Well, that's who I am, and that's what, and the Jurados always do it this way. And the minute we have these rules and these laws that we just write into ourselves, and it's like, but where does it come from? And so that then what happens is then you double down. And by that, what I mean is then when you see what you're doing is not right,
Right.
but it's in conflict with with that base thought that you have to be consistent, that you have to be congruent in your life.
Right.
So then you default to that's one that's stronger. So you're like, well, I know this is wrong, but I'm just going to do it because that's who I am. And that's, Popeye, right? I am what I am. And
Yeah.
you push it. But when you can step back and go, but why? Why do I have to be that way? Why do I have to be that way? I used to had a joke back a million years ago when say, I'm a jerk, and I'm always a jerk, right? I'm never going to surprise you. I'm not going to be a nice guy one day and then be a jerk the next day. As a manager, I used to jokingly say that, and whatever, for whatever's worth. But I learned that wasn't right. But beyond that, we have to be able to look at that, because that's one of our deepest rules, is that we don't want to be seen as not being consistent, about not being true to who we are, because you don't want to be a phony, you don't want to be a fake. And we associate change with being phony or being fake by doing something new and different. But if you put that on yourself, you're never going to grow.
You're right.
So that's one of the first rules that we have to break. That's one of the first rules that we make sure is clear. You know what? If you want to get better in whatever way, better is comparative, and that's got its own issues. But you know what I mean.
Yes.
If you want to grow, if you want to improve, you have to be willing to change.
Yeah. Yes. I love that. And it's so true. We get set in our ways, and we begin to use that as an excuse to why we act the way we do. Well,
Right.
that's just how I am.
Yeah.
But is that how you have to be?
Exactly. Yeah.
You gotta ask that next question.
Yeah.
Okay, that's how you are, but is that how you have to be? Is that representative of how you want people to see you in this world?
Yeah.
And I think when we get to that place of self-love, and we get to that place of being able to look within, they say so much of who we are begins with what's inside, but we've got this lovely largest organ on our body called skin, that's so thick that sometimes we can't get beyond our own skin. We can't get beyond the thickness of our own skin. And that's something that we've created, based on what we've been taught or what we've seen in our environment and what we've embraced. And it's made almost a shell out of and made us thick-skinned, so to speak. So we're not able to penetrate that. And it's so important that we get to that place. I love that you say that. Have a curious, flexible mindset. Again, to be childlike, again, to ask why, to be curious, and to really delve into that. And that's what's going to help us to be those better versions of ourselves. So I absolutely love that. I love that.
Yeah.
This is a heavy conversation.
Yeah, and just one thing as we're coming up on our time, and one more thing I would add. I did mention that there is the path of transformation, a little more pragmatic, a little more step by step, which the structure I use for most clients. But then my actual company is One Path Healing, because I'm a healer. We won't get into all that. We're on time now. But the other one is the spiritual path of transformation, and the R for the spiritual path is reconnect with your inner wisdom. And that's releasing old patterns by tuning into your intuition, your spirit, and then once again your unconscious mind, clearing out what holds you back. And because of who the host is here, you and I talked about this, these different conversations in these different communities. I feel comfortable talking about the spiritual side, and we've clarified the God, Spirit, Creator. And they say that trusting your intuition. They say that prayer is you talking to God, and intuition is God talking to you.
Yes.
And we have to trust our insides. Now, you see, there we go. Pointing to my heart inside, your spirit, trusting that, not necessarily trusting your unconscious mind, because we just spent an hour talking about how the programming of your unconscious mind just comes from just that programming, right? It's got all these other rules that you've learned that since you've been here on this planet, things you've been exposed to, things you've figured out, things you've learned. That's the unconscious mind. But inside, your spirit, that knows the truth with the capital T. That's what you trust. That's what, when you can get quiet and go inside. I love the quote by Rumi that says, silence is the language of God. All else is false translation.
Say it one more time.
Silence is the language of God. All else is false translation. And that might not be a direct quote, that might be a paraphrase, but that's the quote. And when you think about it, when you get quiet and you go inside, that's where you find your truth. It's
Yes.
not those thoughts. It's not those thoughts that go by. It's not that we call it the chattering monkey in the trees, or,
Right.
we talk about the clouds passing by. Those are all those thoughts that your brain has. Brain and mind are totally different. I know that's a big thing to jump right at the end, but
No.
it's
Yeah.
about connection to source, spirit, God. That's what is inside. That's what intuition is. And when you reconnect with your inner wisdom, then you know your truth and you can live your purpose from there.
What else is there to say? We can go on and on. I absolutely love this conversation. I absolutely love the bridge and the many layers that we're peeling back month after month. So I'm just excited as we continue on this journey to talk about this bridge and how it's going to help others to navigate from one space to the next, to choose their path that's going to take them to the top of the mountain, as she said earlier at the top of the show. So again, I thank you so much for being here, Jason,
Yes.
for sharing space with me, for really scratching the surface and allowing people to say, huh, because it's always a matter of getting to that place where, again, we're gaining that curiosity
Yeah.
and saying, okay, I like what I'm hearing. I see that this is something I may not have thought of before. And now I want to start taking that deeper dive. So
Yeah.
one thing that I want you all to do is to make sure that you contact Jason. If you're interested, go to his website. It's been scrolling across the bottom of the screen as we're going through the show, www.onepathhealing.com. Is that the right one? Yes.
That's yes.
Perfect. I want to make sure, because if not,
Yes.
I am so sorry. But yeah,
No.
we want
Perfect.
to make sure that you all reach out, tap in, make sure that if there are things that are piquing your curiosity, if there are things that are causing you to have moments of self-reflection, that you don't just let those go by the wayside, that you tap in, that you start looking at ways to respond and not react to the things that are going on around you, and that you do that, have that curious, flexible mindset. Okay. Any final words before we go, Jason? You've given a lot of nuggets tonight.
Through all this, be good to yourself. Just have self-compassion, be good to yourself. Know that you're doing the best you can with what you've got. You're trying, you're making a move. This life can be challenging. And just by recognizing, what, maybe this isn't the best for me. Maybe I want to change. You're doing so much. That's a huge step. And just, we have to love ourselves, love yourself, start from there, and then to the world from there.
That's it. That's it. One foot in front of the other. You have to walk before you run.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you run. And after that point, you can begin to soar.
Yeah.
Okay.
Love it.
And with that, I'm going to say thanks again for being here, Jason. We look forward to seeing you next month as we continue on talking about living your purpose. Okay. And
All
that
right.
will do it for this edition of the How Now podcast, where we talk about how to live in the now. And until I see you all the next time, I say peace.